The response to the COVID pandemic will go down as one of the biggest national scandals in history. I believe there was a concerted campaign of manipulation, fear-mongering, propaganda and censorship, all propped up by the mainstream media, that plunged us headfirst into the crisis that we see before us today. People who oppose lockdowns were told that they had blood on their hands, but I think it's actually the other way around. Rishi Sunak has revealed the true extent of what I'm calling the Great COVID cover-up, just a week or so after new figures suggested that more people will die as a result of the knock-on effects of lockdown than from COVID itself. Sunak's revelations appear to suggest that our country, our democracy, was hijacked by an unelected cabal of so-called experts who censored dissenting voices and pumped out propaganda to the nation and infiltrated the mainstream media in order to solidify their own power and ensure compliance with the most draconian restrictions to civil liberties that this nation has seen during peacetime. That is what a dictatorship does. Before we get stuck into the detail of this, I want to make one thing very clear from the jump, actually. I'm not giving Rishi Sunak much credit for coming out and revealing this information now. He clearly didn't feel strongly enough about it at the time to resign and go public with his concerns, did he? And the timing of his revelations, just 10 days or so away from the Tory leadership results, smacks more of desperation than it does true conviction. But Rishi claims that anybody who opposed this Orwellian-style scientific and medical groupthink was censored and smeared, and dissenting voices were taken out of minutes of government meetings to make it look as though there was more agreement than there was. And that, ladies and gentlemen, really is a cover-up and a half, isn't it? There was next to no cost-benefit analysis done when it came to lockdowns, no real consideration of the wider impact on, I don't know, public health, mental health, education, the economy, addiction, domestic abuse. I could go on. And in fact, any concern for these things was just brushed aside because the health of the nation was more important. Well, the great irony there is that now our nation is the one strapped up to a ventilator, isn't it, on life support as a result of those decisions. They created a situation very similar to what we've got going on in the Channel, where there are two camps. We've got the bad guys on one side and the good guys on the other. Now, the bad guys looked at the cost-benefit analysis and thought, hang on a minute, when you look at all these knock-on effects of repeated lockdowns, the economic doom looming large around the corner, the destruction of our healthcare system and the desecration of a generation of children's education, maybe we shouldn't just keep following the science. But then, of course, the good guys said, screw that, let the country burn, and we'll just keep pressing ahead, despite the fact that the figures, in my view, were almost always wrong. Omicron, 6,000 deaths a day over winter, peaked at just under 300. Neil Ferguson, who later quit his job after breaking the lockdown laws he was pushing so his married lover could come round for a little bit of fun, predicted 100,000 cases a day. Wrong. We were being told that we had the highest death rate in Europe. Wrong. It turned out, according to records, that you actually couldn't recover from COVID. Do we all remember this? So to break that down, you could get COVID in December, but if you decided to jump out of an aeroplane in June without a parachute, you, my friends, might still have been recorded as a coronavirus death. Bonkers, isn't it? I think the likes of Chris Whitty feel as though that they're beyond reproach. I think the medical community was so blinkered by a culture of deference that even when they could see their modelling was wrong, even when they could see the damage their relentless push for lockdowns was doing, they just pressed ahead anyway. Nobody could question them, could they? And the majority of the media just parroted the good doctor's lines. They pumped out the propaganda, they pumped out the fear, they kept trusting Sage despite them almost always being wrong. They even pushed independent Sage, made up of a bunch of left-wingers, including, indeed, an actual member of the Communist Party, and whose leader largely ignored as well the Great Barrington Declaration. That's right, the media picked those two forms of information over the Great Barrington Declaration. That was, of course, censorship, wasn't it? And as well, COVID rules didn't seem to matter to some people in the media, especially when it came to Kay Burley wanting to have a birthday party, although that, of course, was something she later apologised for. Fair enough. I want justice. I want these people to be held to account for their inaccuracies. I want these people to explain why they pursued a course of action that psychologically, economically, and as it's now turned out, medically, crippled our nation. I want justice for the tens of millions of people who will die because of this NHS backlog, those who've committed suicide, those who went bankrupt, those who developed crippling addiction problems and whose children lost their childhood. Never again.